Hello, everyone. Just going to give everyone a moment to kind of log in. Um, Looks like everybody is coming in. I will say Zoom made some updates this past week, so it's been kind of interesting so far this morning working with things. So we're going to just work with what we've got. My toolbar's kind of been flying around. It disappears and then appears. So I'll just work with it. If you can just have patience, know that it's not me. But it's working and I'm happy. So welcome. I'm Robin Jones, Director of the ABF Career Alliance, and the host of The Net Effect. This is episode number 32. Hard to believe, but yes, it is. The year is flying by. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. And for those of you that will be joining via the webinar recording, welcome as well. So I've got a few little housekeeping items to talk about. If you're not seeing me and you're having trouble with the Zoom, be sure that you have downloaded the application. If not, you will not be able to participate in today's session. So do me a favor, all of you, open up the Q&A button, and that's on the little toolbox. It's usually at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A. Click that, type in your name and where you're from so we can find out if it's working and who all is with us this afternoon. Hello, Jan. Nice to see you. Carol, thank you. Sally, Craig, good to see you, sir. Margaret, Steve, good. Thank you all. Appreciate everyone. Hi, Donna. Good to see you on. We're also live broadcasting on Facebook. So those that are on Facebook, welcome. Look forward to having you all with us today. So Q&A looks like it's up and running. We're not using chat. It's been disabled. So I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A throughout our session this afternoon. So be sure if you have a question, type it in that Q&A box and we'll get to it as soon as we can. But if you have questions, put them in there. We'd love to hear from you. And Alina would love to be able to ask questions for you. So we are the Albert Baker Fund, and the Albert Baker Fund is impacting the education of nearly 1,000 students annually. So we'd like to be sure that you know where we are, ABF Career, I'm sorry, that's the Career Alliance, but albertbakerfund.org. And you can learn all about our programs there just by going to that website. Please, if you know someone, a student that may need help, reach out to them and point them to our website, and we'll be happy to help in any way that we can. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Alina Beyer. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Robin. It's good to be here.
We're so glad to have you. You have such an incredible and very interesting career path, from working with Muppets to the Mother Church, and finally running away with the circus.
It's true, I did.
What an incredible journey. We're so excited about learning about your journey. So we're just going to jump right in. So you, out of high school, decided to go to a little school in Decatur, Illinois, called Millikan University. Tell us why Millikan.
Why Millikan? So those of you who went to Prin probably are vaguely aware of Millikan. We used to play you in sports. I don't think we do anymore, but I think there's a sports history in there somewhere. I went to Millikan because honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. The school felt like a good size for me. It felt like a good fit for me. And also I felt like I could walk in there not being sure what direction I was going to do and try a lot of different things. And that's what I did. My freshman year, I took an education class, I took a history class, and I took a theater class because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
I think there's a lot of people like that. I think there's a lot of students that walk in and they have 4 or 5 different interests, and they're not quite sure what they want to do with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was fortunate enough that in some of my gen ed classes, I also ended up with a lot of theater kids in my gen ed classes. And so I became good friends with them and really found that getting back into theater was something that I loved. I went my first semester without being involved in any shows and discovered that that was something I didn't want to keep doing.
So you'd done some theater in high school. You'd had some
I
experience.
did,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And when I say theater, my background is entirely technical design. I've been on stage, I think 3 times, and really we just won't repeat the experience.
So you found your calling behind the curtain, so to speak.
Right. Or, on the other side of the stage behind the lights.
Right. Well, that's a very interesting track. I mean, and I can't imagine. I mean, there's a lot of people in that. I don't know how has it been. How did you get into that? I mean, why was that interesting to you?
It's one of those things. In high school, I had a friend who was a year older than me who was doing lighting tech in high school for theater. And like you do, she was a fellow Sunday school student that I'd known since I was a child. And like you do, you follow your friends into what's interesting to them when you're not sure what you're doing. And she left it and has gone on to do amazing things herself. And I stuck with it. The picture you have up is a very cleaned up and updated version of the theater, one of the theaters that I used to work in college. And then I actually managed this theater as well. So that was my part-time job in college. They had a couple theaters that were mostly used for students, student productions, smaller productions.
Mm-hmm.
And also this theater in particular was used for like traveling lectures when they would come into town, that type of thing. So they had a couple students who would manage the theater. And so we did all of the upkeep for the lights and the sound, and interfaced with people when they wanted to come in and do lectures or presentations or student productions, the dance shows, everything. We kind of had a hand in everything. So this and one other space.
I mean, that's a lot to do when you're in college. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility.
It was a
Well, we may have got a little glitch here. Looks like Alina, looks like you're frozen. We may have to log back in. So yeah, sometimes this kind of thing happens when you're live. So you just move on and you wait. Her background has just been, it's an amazing journey. But before I kind of go any further, I want to just make sure that I'm just going to reach out to her real quick. Yeah, looks like she's going to relog back in. That happens sometimes. I'm just going to check. Here she comes. Just give us a quick second. We'll just take a quick little break here. Again, if any of you, I want to kind of go back to the first slide that we had here. If you know any students, be sure that you have them reach out to the Albert Baker Fund. We know that they've had a lot of increased expenses and costs due to the environment that we're in. And so be sure that you move them and direct them towards the Albert Baker Fund. Again, that's albertbakerfund.org, and you can click on the apply button, and that'll show you the different drop downs that we have for North American students. And there's wonderful directions there and lots of informations, and just walk you right through. So go to the Albert Baker Fund and help those students that may need help out there. So
my apologies, Robin.
Hey, no problem. That's what happens today. Sometimes
my internet dropped out.
Well, we're back. So
we're back
into the world of the theater and managing, and a lot of responsibility. Tell us a little bit about that.
On top of this, Robin, I decided senior year that it would be really fun to add a second major. So I learned senior year that I was about 3 classes short of having a history major, because I also stuck with my love of history. So senior year, I actually went on overload classes, which I do not recommend, and did get my history major as well, on top of all of this adventure.
So a dual major, working, managing 3 theaters. My goodness. And it looks like you guys have built a new theater.
This is the brand new theater building, building of theater for the School of Theater and Dance at Millikan. They just opened this fall. I have seen videos. I haven't been there yet, but everything I've seen looks absolutely amazing. So I'm hoping to get down there and see the new building. It's in the space where our old building was, but it looks nothing like the building I went to school in.
Wow, that looks really, really nice.
It's beautiful.
So when you graduated, you kind of jumped right in.
I did.
Yeah,
And
right into a new career. Oh my gosh, the Cookie Monster.
Cookie Monster, yes. This is one of my favorite photos from the multiple tours that I did with Sesame Street Live. So I jumped in, and when I graduated, I again wasn't sure where I wanted to go. But a friend who had graduated a few years ahead of me reached out and said, "Hey, I just lost my assistant electrician. What are you doing for the next 9 months?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So I got the call on, I think, Monday, accepted the job on Tuesday, flew out Thursday, and opened the show on Friday.
Oh my gosh.
It was quick, but that led to 2 years on the road with Sesame Street Live.
I can't imagine what it's like traveling with Cookie Monster and Big Bird.
It's so much fun. It is so much fun. That's a full cast photo. They're full body costume characters. So if you think, the Mickey Mouse that you see at Disneyland, we're going for about the same size.
Oh my gosh.
It was story after story of adventures. I did what they called the East Coast tour twice. So I stayed mostly east of the Mississippi, but we did everything from big cities to little tiny middle of nowhere towns. And it was just a lot of fun. It was quite the adventure.
I mean, what was that like? I mean, jumping right from college into, a full blown production while you're traveling on the road. And
they had opened the production 2 months before. So I was jumping in as a filler. So I jumped in with both eyes and both hands open. Was all I could do. Was, the first show I actually worked backstage as well, doing props during the show. And there was one part where props would just come flying off the stage and we had to catch them.
Oh gosh.
My first attempt. And we got them and it worked. But
well, I love what you just said about your hands open and your eyes open. What do you mean by that?
I think I've learned throughout my career that the more I pay attention to what's going on around me, the more those things randomly show up in the future. There's very few things that I've ever done that never come back in my career path. And I've been all over the place, as we'll hear today. But, my hand's open for what can I do? What can I give? What can I receive? How can I be of service here? And my eyes open to pay attention to see those little things that, people might be missing, people might be in need of. And there are so many things that, a new set of eyes sees so many things that people who have done this for years and years and years just miss, because, somebody starts saying that's how we've always done it. And that is the death of so many things. So I jumped in and, learned as fast as I could. My local crew on that particular stop had done the show before, so they were able to teach me. And these were the people that I would then turn around the next week and train how to do the job that I'd been taught the week before. So they were able to teach me. I had great support from my coworkers, and I just hopped in and did it, because if you have a background in theater, especially student theater, there's a lot of hopping in and doing.
Yeah, roll up your sleeves and kind of get after it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, so you were there for a couple years, and then you decided to make a change, or what happened?
So I was there for a couple years and loved it. And then that same person who'd reached out to me saying, "Hey, I need an assistant." Um, the way the jobs worked would be we do 9 months, 10 months on, and then a month, 2 months off in the summer. So I was off for the summer, and a lot of times people would pick up summer work here and there. And the same person, the same guy who was a few years ahead of me in college and had taught me how to be a theater manager and then taught me how to be an electrician on the road, gave me a call and said, "Hey, I managed to double book myself. What are you doing for the next 2 weeks?"
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because when I'm out working with students and speaking and doing workshops, one of the things I always say to students is, take a look around the room and survey who's in here, because, some of these people are going to end up helping you find a job, or you may reconnect with and work with down the road. But,
Absolutely.
I mean, is that, or would you echo that? Obviously you'd echo that.
Every job I've ever gotten, except for maybe one, came through a friend, a coworker, someone that I knew, maybe someone that I hadn't talked to in years, reaching out and saying, "Hey, I know of this. This might work for you."
So you reached out and you found yourself.
Yeah, that's about where I found myself, quite honestly.
Right. Oh gosh.
I put up this picture. I sent you this picture specifically because I did 9 months of untangling that. I was doing museum exhibits throughout the US and South America and also in Europe.
Wow.
It was probably the most stressful position I've ever held. I learned a crazy amount, but it was probably the most stressful position I've ever held.
I mean, so you're helping organize, and tell us a little bit about kind of stuff you were doing.
So
And yeah.
I was still an electrician, so I was quite literally organizing these cables and running them out and setting up lights and getting, especially working in Europe and South America, the power is different. So you have to make sure all your conversions are right to handle the power, setting up the level of the lights, setting up the location, directing local crews, directing 10, 15, 20 other individuals to get these things set up and ready. And, when you're working in South America as a petite female, directing a mostly young male crew, it's a unique challenge.
So there weren't many women doing the kind of work that you were doing?
No, not at all. There's not, technical theaters are heavily male, especially in the electrician sound end of things, is a heavily male field.
So how did you get through that? I mean, how did you work? How did you overcome those obstacles?
It was, some days it was a day by day. I also made some really good friends. Friends who weren't necessarily working in the exact thing I was doing. The curator for our exhibits became one of my very close friends. And he and I traveled together when we'd go out after work when we were both absolutely exhausted and just walk around Vienna or Buenos Aires, Argentina, and just walk and see the city, because we didn't want to just give up on and go to bed, even though we probably should have. So it was a lot of, getting support from people around me and finding the people who were supportive. At the end of this position, I was let go from the position. They had hired me in a different capacity than they'd hired technicians in the past. And I think it was a combination of, they didn't want to continue the capacity in which I'd been hired in. Mm-hmm. And also, there might have been some other issues with people with, some misogyny issues that, I won't accuse them of, but I felt. And so there was a lot of healing required after that to kind of let go of that anger.
So what did you do to work through that? I mean, how did you address that?
I took a month off.
Hmm.
I got off the road and I had been visiting friends in Boston, and I decided to stay in Boston. My friends had an open room in their apartment that they rented me. And I took a month off and I really sat down and figured out where I wanted to go next. I did a lot. That's Boston. I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of kind of trying to focus on what made me happy and what direction I wanted to go in and what was important to me. And during this month, I was able to go down to Washington, D.C. for the TMC Youth Summit in D.C. And at that summit, I met the woman who would become my Christian Science teacher. I had to wait for her to become a teacher first, but once she did, I was right there. But I really just did a lot of kind of soul searching of what in a position makes me happy and what in a position is something that I don't want. And this wasn't looking for titles. This was, I enjoy positions where I'm active. I don't sit all day. I can't. I love being up and active. So that was something that I found about myself. And that's not the type of thing you can hunt for on, a resume. You can't put that on your resume. But once I knew that, I was able to pay attention to positions and say, is this a position where I will sit all day? Or is this a position where I'll get up and run around? And that became, something that I looked for and continue to look for.
So how did the next thing, I mean, I'm always amazed at theater people and film people because, they're always on to the next job. They're always, it's just kind of one of those things that they live with and they learn how to work through it. So how did you get to the next job?
Like the last job, a friend of mine, a friend of my boyfriend at the time, reached out and said, hey, the company I work for is hiring a legal temp for the summer. Are you interested? And I said, sure, why not? I have nothing to do for the next 3 months. I don't know where I'm going. Let's try it. I did end up back on the road with Sesame Street for a month real quick there. I closed up a tour for them. And then right when I got home from that, my friend reached out, and 2 weeks later, I started working for a legal department. And that's where my history degree came in handy, because I read and read and read and read and wrote reports on what I read. But that 3-month temp position turned into 3 years and 3 months, where I worked first as a temp and then eventually moved up to being the executive assistant for the CFO and the general counsel of the company. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I learned how to read contracts. I learned how to deal with, pay attention to a lot of different types of people. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved, being involved with people from all levels, from the janitor to the CEO.
What I love about that is that you have a willingness. I mean, you demonstrate a willingness to listen, and when someone reaches out and offers something, you jump. I mean, you make a move. You're not afraid to. Well, I'll give that a shot.
Oh no, I'm afraid to do it, but I do it.
Okay, well, there we go. But you do it. So I mean, and it's interesting, listening to your journey and how the things that you learn seem to be what you need to know for the time, and
what I need to know for the time, and things that I learn that will come back and bite me later, because I'll need to know them in 5 years.
And the other thing that's amazing to me is that every one of these positions has been from a friend. So I always ask my guests, how important is reaching out to professionals, and how important is it to have conversations with people that are, intentional about what you're doing and what they're doing.
I'm pretty sure you just like this as a rhetorical question, Robin.
It's true. I do. It's easy. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yes, exactly. It's the legal position I was offered was from the friend of my boyfriend, and the two of them played music together. They were musicians, so it wasn't, and I ended up with a legal position out of it. So there was no logical path in that. But that's where it led. And I think, and as I said earlier, every position I've ever had has come through reaching out and talking to people in all kinds of fields, and especially unexpected people. Those are my favorites. People, the position I'm in now came through a person that reached out to that I ran into at a social event, networking for another company that I was working for. And he and I got to talking, and he asked my background, and I told him that my background was in theater. And he said, "Oh, there's someone you should meet." And the individual I was talking to happened to be a former executive for Second City, which is a huge improv company in Chicago.
Yep.
Most Saturday Night Live performers come out of Second City.
Right.
So he got me hooked into the position that I'm in right now, just completely off the cuff.
So
Yes.
a conversation with a friend in a totally different, unrelated, how does that happen?
It's both eyes and both hands open. In that particular event, I was networking for a nonprofit, and he was there as someone who was potentially going to be on the board of the organization that was running this networking event for local nonprofits. And I couldn't even tell you how our conversation started. We probably ran into each other, getting a drink or picking up an hors d'oeuvre or something like that. And
so let me just ask one quick question. You said a networking event for local nonprofits. Is that what you said?
It is, yes.
So, I mean, was that something did you plan on going to that, or was that?
The event was the grant kickoff. There's a large organization that gives massive grants to nonprofits in this specific area. And so this grant organization did a kickoff every year for their grants.
Got it.
And so their kickoff event was always, 45 minutes of here's how you fill out all the information. Here's the information we need to know for your grant application. Here's the process to go through. And then after that, they would basically let everybody loose for, a networking social hour. And I wandered around and chatted with people. I would chat with people I knew, but, sometimes offhand comments to a random person standing next to you, picking out something at the cheese tray, turns into something interesting.
Well, what's so interesting about this whole thing is that, I'm always saying to people, hey, look for opportunities out there to go meet people. And, and you'll find those. And I find it very interesting that there was this grand organization. They have this, it's not necessarily, hey, come to this networking event. You have to peel it back a little bit, right? And have that opportunity to go into places and look for some of those unique, I would call that a unique opportunity,
Absolutely.
So yeah, pretty interesting.
It was unique, but I've also met some really amazing people who I've been able to work with through going to a meetup. I went to a walking group meetup because I was new to the neighborhood, and I found a group that was doing a 3 or 4 mile walk on a Sunday afternoon in my neighborhood. And they were going to go through the local cemetery and look at, some of the fun gravestones. I live next to a huge cemetery. And while chatting with people, I overheard someone say that they worked in theater, and the two of us got to talking, and we ended up being resources for each other later on.
It's just remarkable.
And again, these are not places that I go to intending to meet people, or I'm intending to meet people, but not intending to do work related meeting of people.
So tell us where, so now you're in this new role that was, you were referred to by a friend, and this whole journey that you, and you find yourself landing in this position. So tell us about what you do now and the kind of stuff that you're doing now.
Absolutely. I work for Randolph Entertainment. We are the producing company for Teatro ZinZanni Chicago. Teatro ZinZanni is a Cirque Cabaret vaudeville style performance. As you can see in the photo, it's also a dinner theater. So we have about when we were up and running before everything shut down. We sat about 290 people a night to do a 3-hour performance plus a 4-course meal, plus a full hour of cocktails and hors d'oeuvres before the show. So it is a combination of theater, restaurant, performance, and cocktail lounge.
And so what are your duties like? I mean, what kind of stuff do you do as a theater manager?
I am the chief herder of cats and wearer of all the hats. So part of my role involved with the cast specifically, I was the company manager. So I managed most of the cast was from out of town. So I managed their apartments. I managed if they had any health needs, if they had any travel needs. I put together packets so they could learn the city, learn where they are, give them directions. I also, as far as the theater management strictly, it's the cleaning and the repairs. And
are you pulling cables?
I have. I have. I also have been known to move tables around on a regular basis. Well, part of my job is also to manage the front of house before shows. So I get dressed up in a fabulous beaded dress, and I've been known to move tables and repair doors while wearing that dress, getting ready for work.
I can see you with a hammer and nails and a tape measure stuck around your belt.
Usually it's a screw gun, but yes.
So in looking back over all the different things that you've done, and we really didn't talk much about your time at the Mother Church. That was in there too, the journey. How has all these different roles helped you in preparing where you are today?
As I said, everything I've learned along the way has come up. I learned in college to read drawings and to draft. And I got a promotion in a job because I was the only one in the room who could read the drawings, and they were in the middle of building, construction for a new building.
And that came from your theater.
That came from my theater background.
Who knew? Who would know?
I learned to read contracts under a contracts attorney. And if you ever learn to read contracts, it is the most useful thing you can ever do in a job. Contracts are boring, but that is the most useful thing. Some people love them. For me, they're boring. Learning to repair things all along the way, learning to manage a cleaning team. I learned that with the Mother Church. Event management. I started that in college. I did it more with the Mother Church. I did it with other positions, and now I manage an event every night.
Well, it's interesting too, because you moved around with jobs that we talked about before, but there was always one waiting somewhere as you were ready for the next thing.
As I was ready, there were I had longer periods of unemployment. I had periods of, I picked up a retail job. I'm a skier, and I picked up a retail job working at a ski shop. It was my first ever retail job, and I was in my 30s. But it was amazing. I learned so much. I learned to talk with people. I learned to find, I found their passions. It was easy because everybody who walks into a ski shop is interested in skiing. But you found people's passions and what they were interested in. And I was able to use that in my current position when I often walk up to strangers who are standing around waiting before a show and just start to strike up a conversation.
I love that. Well, what does it look like now? I mean,
Well, as almost every other theater in the country and many around the world, we are waiting. We're waiting to see what happens with the COVID. Broadway is officially not opening until September at the earliest, I believe. So we are also looking, but I spend a lot of time working with my boss on what would a reopening look like? How do we get people in safely? How do we keep the cast safe? How do we keep the crew safe? What needs to change with the new guidelines? What guidelines, what will these things look like? And that includes things like budgeting, which is also something I learned along the way and picked up. I never took a finance class. I never took a budgeting class. If you're in college, take finance and budgeting classes, just one.
Good to know.
I regret it immensely. But I never took these classes. So I've picked it up along the way from amazing people who are willing to teach me.
Right. So looking back and thinking about what your top takeaways are, let's go through this list. It's a very interesting list, I think.
So learn from everything and everyone was when you and I first talked about this, Robin. That was kind of the first thing that popped into my mind.
Yeah.
And I think I've probably mentioned that 100 times as we've talked today.
Right.
But the janitor from my first office job is still my friend on Facebook.
That's amazing.
Because he and I just made friends and I learned stuff from him. But I also, sat in the CEO's office and had conversations with him and learned stuff from him. When I left that position, the chief operating officer, who I had never had a lot of interactions with, came over and made a point to say, hey, I really enjoyed working with you. And I really appreciate what you did. I never interacted with her that much, but it was, she was very aware of everything that was going on. And I think that's something that I picked up a little bit from her because she had fingers in everything. She knew everything that was going on.
Well, I love your humility, Alina. I mean, I think it's wonderful and it's remarkable.
It's the more you learn from other people, we're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to function as silos. And I see so many companies and organizations that I've interviewed with who say, well, we function as a silo. We only do this. This is, if you take this job, you will only do these 5 things. And every job I've ever had has always kind of been the snake, the connecting rod between all of these people. Part of my position right now, there are 3 or 4 companies involved in the Teatro ZinZanni performance every night. And I chat with people from all of them every day to make sure that we're all on the same page, we all know what's going on, and everyone's had their communication.
Well, tell us about know who you are and be confident about it.
Yeah, this one's tricky. This is something I've learned more recently, and I would not have known particularly in college. But it's along the lines of what I said when I was let go from that touring position, and I was kind of lost for a while. But I started listing out what's important to me, what are my strengths, and my strengths have never fit well on a resume.
Did you struggle with that? I mean, I know a lot of people, and they start to look at that, boy, they start doing, they get a little antsy, and they I gotta go over here and do this thing, right?
It's hard. It's really hard to start listing your strengths, especially because, we're so taught that we should be humble. And, in Christian Science, we're taught that we reflect all of the qualities of God. And if you reflect all of the qualities of God, how do you reflect some of them more than others?
Good question.
So I struggled a lot with that, really trying to figure out what is my particular reflection look like? What is
How did
my,
you find the piece to do? I mean, how'd you find that? How did you find a way into that?
I was fortunate enough to be able to take some time off between jobs when I really got stuck. And that has been an incredible blessing. And I know that's not something that everybody can do. But I was fortunate enough to I've taken some time off. I've been able to pick up some part-time positions that really let me sit down and think. But, I've done this while I was job hunting. And sometimes I just would make lists of things I like, if I could create a dream job, what would it be? And the first 5 things on my list are it'd be active, it involve people from all walks of life. It involves a lot of communication in all directions. It involves the ability to dress up, but also dress down. And it lets me travel. And none of those things are a job description. But all of those things are part of who I am. And as I've figured that out, I've also gone into interviews where I interviewed for a job and went, no, this is not who I am. And I interviewed for some amazing positions that could have been incredible. But I got in there and I said, this is not a fit for me. This is not my home. And that walking away from jobs, or walking away from in the interview process is hard. Because we're all geared towards, we should take what's offered to us as a job. But in choosing between taking what's offered to us and what's true to me, I found better jobs that honestly have resulted in paying me more as well.
Well, that's kind of nice. Cool.
It was nice. It doesn't always work that way, but it has a couple times. It's been delightful.
So is that relatable to Find Your True North? Is that different?
It's very relatable to Find Your True North. My Find Your True North was a phrase that was shared with me when I was really deeply hunting for something different. I was not happy where I was. I was not happy with what I was doing. I knew the position I was in. I knew when I started the job that it was not a long-term position for me. And while I learned so much and worked with so many incredible people, it wasn't a good fit. And I knew that. And so I had started job hunting, shortly into the position, knowing that this just wasn't my right home. When I started the position, I thought I'd be there for 2 years. I made 18 months. But Find Your True North was shared with me by someone who really, I was talking with him a lot about, these are the types of jobs I'm looking for. These are the job titles I'm looking for. And he kind of kicked me back to, I guess, a lot of what I said about know who you are and be confident about it. He kicked me back and said, job titles are great, but job titles change. They adjust. They are not consistent by any stretch of the imagination. And your job title doesn't describe what you do in probably 90% of jobs. So he really pushed me to find what pulls me home, what pulls me in the right direction. And that was when I again started sitting down and making those lists of what qualities am I looking for in a job, and what activities, what involvement, how do I want to present myself? And of course our true north is God, but we need to, how are we expressing that? How is my expression, how is my reflection of God different than yours, Robin, different than, anyone else who's watching tonight? How are we each different reflections right now?
And do you feel like where you are right now, you're in that true north pathway?
It's a really solid step for it. I love what I'm doing, and I hope that we're able to get stuff up and going again so I can do it some more. But once I also understand that sometimes life is fluid, and I might be here for another year, I might be here for another 20 years. We'll see.
Well, I hope I get to sit in that theater at some point.
I would love to have you out here,
Oh
Robin.
my
I know you
God,
have reasons to visit Chicago, so I'm looking forward to it.
it looks so much fun. So we're at the end of our. I can't believe how quick these things go. My wife makes fun of me because she's, you always say that. I know, but it happens so fast. So I'm gonna jump into our Q&A. Steve asks, how do you keep actors safe when they're singing and speaking loudly indoors? I'm sure that's some of the conversations.
That is 100% the conversations we're having right now. And that is, those conversations are being had in theaters around the world. How do we do, right now, potentially there's a lot of conversation of is there.
Well, may have another quick break here. While we're doing the quick break, I'll just take advantage of this opportunity to launch our poll. As soon as she gets back and logs back in, she probably have to jump out and come back in like she did before. So these polls are really important to the Albert Baker Fund. So please take a moment and as we're moving forward here, looks like you're back, but for some reason your picture is there. We go. I've never seen that happen, but that happened.
Okay. I'm on my phone now. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. Okay, great.
Let's see if I can.
Now you're back in both places.
Yeah.
No problem. While you're getting set back up there. Oh, good. Got our poll launched. So I'm just going to let that hang out.
The poll.
Yeah. So going back to the masks, and the follow-up question to that too was, can performers wear masks? Is that something you're considering?
That is, it's something we've discussed. The challenge with our space is it's a cabaret style space, which means that our performers are usually pretty darn close to our audience members. And we use every inch of floor space that we have available. So we've also discussed how do we adjust our performers? How do we do masks? There are clear masks that are out there. There are singer specific masks that are out there that are kind of a longer setup further away from the face. So there's more flexibility, but they also permit singers to do a full projection. And if you put a microphone under there, you're going to catch the sound. If you watch, Broadway's done several kind of outdoor events on the steps in Times Square. And I've seen some of those masks out there, the singers' masks.
I haven't seen that. That's interesting. I know, I watch football and I see the coaches on the sideline, and I'm a coach. I've coached football for over 30 something years, and having to deal with that thing. You're always fussing with it, because you're trying to project and you're trying to yell across this. I can imagine it's something similar. If you're on a stage, you want to project and you got this, you got to learn how to work through that, right?
And that's the question is, will we learn how to work through that? Will we have to wait to reopen? And unfortunately, places like New Zealand are completely open. South Korea is holding entirely full theater performances right now. The entire audience is masked. And some of that challenge is also you have to know your audience and know your population. Do you have a population that will sit through a 2-hour performance and not take off their mask the entire time to keep everyone else safe?
Well, is there going to be an increased cost? I mean, that's one of the things I would wonder. If you can't put as many people in the space, the ticket prices go up.
And that's, I think, what we're going to see in a lot of performance venues while we're waiting for things to get to the point where we can go back to where they were. Is we might see a lot of prices going up because you just can't have that same accessibility that we used to have. And we can't pack in as many people, and we did some rearranging to try to make social distancing happen in our space, and we cut our audience almost in half.
Wow. So does that mean, what do you do for staff? I mean, what do you do for the crew? Are they just kind of all furloughed, or is there a plan to bring them back, or how do you manage that? My gosh.
Almost every theater around the world laid off their entire staff at the same time back in March. And these are performers, these are crew, everybody. I've stayed in touch with a lot of our crew and a lot of our performers. Some of them are doing online performances. Some of them are working in different industries, have picked up completely different jobs to try to make it through. But at this point, we don't have a way to reemploy people for quite a while at this point, until we get to a point where it is safe to gather in large groups again. And so it's a constant challenge. My company right now, I'm fortunate to still be employed. I was laid off for several months and I'm back now taking care of, but I've picked up 100 extra jobs in the process because I'm taking care of so many extra things that were other people's responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Carol McClure says, hello, your Sunday school teacher.
Callie, yes.
Yeah, Callie. Okay, good. Yeah, she says Carol here, but I see Callie. Yep. Okay, great. And glad you're still praying and you've turned out great. And I would echo that. So thank you. This is the Career Alliance, and we would love to have more folks like Alina. Alina is a career ally with us, and that means that she's willing to do informational interviews with students or work and network with other career professionals, be just a resource for lots of different things.
Hopefully someday get to post jobs again.
Yeah, that's right. We'll welcome that for sure. If you're not a career ally or someone who's a job seeker or a student, be sure and send them to abfcareeralliance.org. We'd love to have you join our community. We have one-to-one career connections, job opportunities, externships. And if you would like to connect with Alina, you can request a connection. All you have to do is click on that little link right there, and it will send a notice right to me, and we'll help you get connected with Alina. Or you can just send me an email, robin@albertbakerfund.org. Please follow us and like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and connect with us on LinkedIn. And one last time, if you know a student or someone who knows a student who may need help in the spring, be sure and have them apply, because we're looking at the spring semesters right now. Again, the albertbakerfund.org. Gosh, I would say today you gave us some great inspiration for all the wonderful things that you've been doing and the things that you're doing now. And I just want to thank you for that. Thank
you, Robin. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and it was fun to kind of sit down and go through a lot of this stuff that you don't think about that often.
Right. That's right. Well, we love that. We love this idea of casting the net on the right side. And I can see without equivocation that your net has been full many, many times. And it's so fun to see that. And I want to thank the Albert Baker Fund team. They're an incredible group of people for supporting this webinar series. And I love everything we're doing here. Just a quick programming note. Next week is Thanksgiving week. So we've decided to celebrate Thanksgiving and take the holiday off. So there won't be a net effect next Friday. So the next one will be December 4th when we resume our webinars for the net effects. So have any questions? Again, if you have any issues, if you know someone who needs help, reach out to Robin@albertbakerfund.org. Again, thank you, dear, and you have a happy Thanksgiving.
You as well. You and your family, Robin. Take care.
Look forward to seeing everyone.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.